This is Robert Taylor. Today I'm reviewing the Acoustic Signature XX Neo turntable and the TA2000 Neo tone arm. Stay tuned. The Acoustic Signature XX Neo turntable costs $6,995. The TA2000 Neo tone arm costs $3,695 for a total system price of $10,660. The turntable is 17.32 inches wide, 13.78 inches deep, and 5.9 inches high. The platter weighs in at 22.7 pounds, and the overall turntable weight is 53 pounds. Here are some of the features of the turntable. There's automatic vibration control technology. This removes unwanted resonances in the motor. There's constrained layer dampening. This uses an aluminum alloy and brass together to reduce resonances in the platter. The platter contains these devices called silencers, which are polished brass bolts embedded in the platter to reduce and absorb vibrations. The turntable features a Duraturn diamond bearing with a diamond-coated spindle, and this also helps with noise and vibrations. There's a 3-point setup feet under the bottom that are gel damped. The finish of the turntable is a McIntosh wood on the top plinth, but a black finish is also available, and the turntable features an incredible 15-year warranty. The TA2000 Neo tone arm, as supplied in this review, is finished in silver in the 9-inch version. There's also a 12-inch version, and the optional finishes are black, gold, or chrome. The tone arm comes with an Audioquest Golden Gate tone arm cable, and the arm has adjustments for VTA and azimuth. The cartridge used in this review is the DS Audio 003 optical cartridge with its accompanying 003 energizer. Setup of the table and cartridge was done using the Wally tools, Wally Tractor, and Wally Skater.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tom Martin, executive publisher of The Absolute Sound and a reviewer here on the TAS YouTube channel. I'd like to invite you to take advantage of a special offer that we have. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter simply by entering your email address either in the form you'll find on screen, or you can click on the link in the show notes below and enter your email address. Twice a week, actually, we will send you audio reviews, written reviews that you won't find here on YouTube, music reviews, and our famous Editor's Choice and Product of the Year awards. This allows you to find the best equipment in audio, as well as read our extensive and authoritative review coverage of hundreds of audio products. We would enjoy having you as subscribers. And now back to the show.
The first time I sat down and listened to this turntable, my first thought was the sound was really lively. The music seemed quicker. The bass is the best I've ever heard from a turntable in my system. The highs are extended and airy. I hear low-level detail that I didn't know existed on records out of this turntable. Sonic images of the performers are sharper. The soundstage layering and depth are both excellent. The turntable is incredibly quiet. The ability to shift between soft and loud on this turntable surprised me. Overall, this is the best record playing system I've ever had in my system, and it has the ability to make the walls of my listening room disappear unlike anything I've ever heard before. Still, after 2 months of using this turntable, I still find myself flipping through my record collection and wondering how this will sound or how that will sound. While the majority of my records are kept on shelves in my basement, I now have big piles of records on the floor near the turntable because I keep bringing records upstairs and not putting anything back downstairs. I started thinking about this turntable as a time machine. This turntable took me back to 1974 when I bought this album right here. This is the very first album I ever bought. I've played this album on every record playing system for the past 50 years. It's not an audiophile pressing by any means. As you can see, the jacket is pretty well beat up. The record is in decent shape, but it does have some scratches. But I love the sound of Philip Bailey's vocals on this album. I love hearing instruments like the kalimba, which you had never heard in the US before this album emerged. And this is one of those albums that I think could use an audiophile upgrade, a current pressing at least on better vinyl, remaster to bring out a little more of the bass and a little more of the fine details that's probably in the tape that was obscured by 1974 recording equipment. In 1977, I bought a copy of Hart's second album, Little Queen. I listened to that recently and just was really impressed with the kick-ass nature of this album. Ann Wilson's vocal really cuts loose on this album, I think more so than it does on their first album. You can hear the sheer drive on songs like Barracuda, where it's just a pounding rhythm and her belting her lungs out. I'm really impressed with the sound quality of this album. I didn't think it sounded that good back in the day, but listening to it on this turntable really impresses on how good this recording actually was. One of my recent album purchases, that is an album that's new to me, but I think it's been out a couple of years now, is Black Acid Soul from Lady Blackbird. The first song on the album is called Blackbird, and that song is an incredible, I would say, example of dynamics of this turntable. Toward the very end of the song, Lady Blackbird is singing along with her accompanying backup band. Everybody stops, the band goes silent, and then you can hear this little bit of a pre-echo, and then she belts out the final chorus. The song goes from dead quiet to incredibly loud. The first time I heard it, I practically jumped out of my seat. And to this day, when I hear it, I still jump a little bit because it goes from 0 to 60 in an instant. I pulled out my copy of Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. I bought this album sometime in the mid to late 70s. I don't remember exactly which year I bought this album. But I listened to it on this turntable, and it shows the sheer power of like John Bonham's drum set, just the sheer grunt and dynamic impact of it, along with Jimmy Page's guitar playing and Robert Plant's almost screechy cat-like vocals. To me, this is one of my favorite Led Zeppelin albums, and it's one of the best sounding Led Zeppelin albums I've heard. I pulled out my copy of Dark Side of the Moon. The version I have is a Mobile Fidelity copy, the original Mobile Fidelity, that I bought sometime in the early to mid 80s for I think $17. Listening to the effects on that album, it sounds like I have a 5-channel surround sound system in my system instead of 2-channel stereo. You can clearly hear the effects as images pan front to back, from behind the speakers in front all the way to behind the listening position and back. You can hear the sound panning left to right clearly and distinctly. I've listened to this album for years on various turntables, and I never heard the effect quite like that. I can literally hear things behind me and above my head. I can hear sounds going from the floor all the way up to the ceiling as it moves up and down. You can clearly, distinctly hear those sounds in specific locations. Sometime wandering through a record store, I found a copy of the Peter Gunn soundtrack, an original version from 1959 on an RCA Living Stereo pressing. On the first side of this album, you can hear the pre-echo notes on about 3 of the 6 songs. You just hear that faint sound of the music starting, then it kicks in. You can hear the big band playing. You can just hear the power and the blat of those horns from that big band playing on this album. And then when you hear the soloist, you can hear all the space in the recording studio that this was recorded in. You can hear the sound of the trumpets or the trombones as they solo, reflecting off the studio walls, just eliminating the walls in my listening room, making it sound like I'm in that studio. That's the kind of detail you get out of this turntable setup. I think my favorite jazz fusion album is from the supergroup Return to Forever, and the album is Romantic Warrior. On the song Romantic Warrior, it starts out at a fairly leisurely pace with the four musicians playing together. And as it builds, you can hear this crescendo build toward the end where the musicians are playing at breakneck speed, all bouncing off each other. They're all kind of playing a solo at the same time while still playing together. You hear a little bit of this call and response from one musician playing something and then the other musician bouncing off of that. And then the very end of the song just kind of tails off back to a quiet finish. The musicians, Stanley Clarke, Chick Corea, Lenny White, and Al Di Meola are all at the top of their game on this record. You can hear every single musician playing in their own space, and you can just hear every single note perfectly. I've never heard this album sound any better than it does on the Acoustic Signature Double X Neo turntable. In 1985, I bought a copy of Sade's Diamond Life, the band's very first album. This is one of those albums that I forget how good it is. I'll play it, then forget about it, and then not play it for a number of years, and then pull it out and play it again. On the Acoustic Signature turntable, this album sounds amazing. Sade's velvety smooth vocals really impress. The band's playing is really good. The songs are all first rate. There's not a bad song on this album. This is one of those albums I think that could sound even better if it got a remaster and got a little respect from Sony Music versus some of the other artists that they seem to reissue over and over again, but they seem to ignore Sade, even though that group has sold millions of albums around the world. I would love to hear what a current remastering engineer can do with this with current technology. But overall, if you can find an original copy of this album, I suggest you do it. Sounds incredible. One of my recent purchases is War's Greatest Hits, the new 45 RPM edition on a 2-disc set from Analog Productions. This album sounds incredible. For example, on the song Slipping Into Darkness, you can hear all the harmonies and blending of the vocals as they sing in unison. On Low Rider, the song style starts with just a cowbell, and you can hear every little detail of that cowbell popping out of the speakers. And then as that continues, then the bass line kicks in, and then you start bobbing your head and tapping your feet to that song. It's just an incredible album. Highly recommend it. Well done, Analog Productions. Do more like that, please. In 1977, I bought a copy of Steely Dan's Asia. This copy right here. This is an original pressing of Asia, and I know for a fact because I bought it the first week this album was available. I pulled this out recently and took a listen to it. While I found it pleasing, I found that the imaging and sound staging were a little homogeneous. The highs weren't as extended as I thought, and you can't clearly follow the musicians as well as I thought you could. So when they announced the new version, the remastered version of Asia, I went out and bought this copy because I want to hear how this sounded versus this copy. So this is the $29 Universal Music Group reissue that was done from a DSD version of the original master tapes. Now, I think the highs are a little more extended on the reissued version versus the original, but they sound a little crispy. What this album definitely lacks is, I would say, the kind of mid-range bloom that this version has. This album sounds, for lack of a better term, digital versus this sounding analog. If I didn't have the original version, I would think that this version would be fine. And one other note, this version of the album does not have the original liner notes with the song lyrics, which I was quite disappointed in. So fast forward, when Acoustic Sounds announced that they were doing the UHQR version of it, I bought this version. This is by far the best version of this album I've ever heard. Not only does it bring back the warmth and the bloom that the original version has, but it also has the extended high frequencies that the digital version has, but without the crispiness that you get out of that reissue. This does all the things well that the other two does, but it also has better imaging. You can hear the musicians and performers outlined more clearly. The soundstage layering is far better. I hear musicians and instruments coming from the front of my speakers all the way behind the speakers in a very clearly defined manner. Horns sound much more natural on this version than I think the other versions. The other versions, horns sound a little homogeneous and not very clear, but you can hear all these differences with the Acoustic Signature turntable setup, and that's the best thing I can think of. It lets you hear the music and it gets out of the way. The Acoustic Signature XX Neo and TA2000 Neo are an expensive proposition at $10,660, and there's no doubt of that. But this is an amazing sounding record playing system. It has smooth extended highs. The bass is impactful, powerful, and deep. This is the quietest turntable I've ever had in my system. The speed stability is rock solid. The dynamics are the best I've ever heard from a turntable in my system. I've bought more new records in the past 2 months using this turntable than I have in the past 3 years. And that's the best compliment I can give to this turntable. It makes you want to listen to records more and more.